A lot of exciting things are happening in the psychedelic research space right now. Researchers at places like Johns Hopkins, UC Berkeley, and UT Austin are studying psilocybin for depression, addiction, end of life anxiety, and even whether it might help protect the brain against aging. And the results have been promising and have caught the attention of Congress, the VA, the FDA, and even the White House. But one question I hear all the time is, why are these studies using synthetic psilocybin? Now, some people argue that it maintains the dosage, potency, and consistency, and there's some truth to that, but that's not the whole story. The reality is that natural mushrooms can be extracted and standardized, and we already do this with countless other plant-based medicines. Researchers can create consistent preparations with predictable potency if they want to. The real reason is economics. Yes, money. Because many of the largest clinical trials are being funded or supported by companies that are pursuing FDA approval. And one of the most prominent is Compass Pathways, the company behind COMP360, which is a proprietary synthetic formula. Compass has attracted hundreds of millions of dollars in investments and support from some of the most influential investors, including billionaire Peter Thiel. And coincidentally, following the White House's executive order focused on accelerating treatments for serious mental illnesses, the FDA granted Compass a priority voucher, allowing for it to significantly accelerate its review process only a few days later. Yes, was that a coincidence? Probably not. Now, don't get me wrong. On one hand, I am grateful. For decades, research has been practically frozen, and now we're seeing investments, large clinical trials, growing public acceptance, and real momentum towards making these therapies available to people who are suffering. And that matters. That matters a lot. If a for-profit company helps bring these medicines into the mainstream and gets effective treatment to veterans, trauma survivors, and people struggling with depression, that's a good thing. But, big but, I also have concerns. Because what happens if synthetic medicine receives approval while natural mushrooms remain restricted? What happens to the indigenous traditions that preserve these medicines long before pharmaceutical companies even existed? And what happens if the public begins to believe that healing comes only from a sterile clinic rather than from the broader wisdom, community ritual, and relationships with nature that have traditionally surrounded these medicines? Those are important questions worth asking. And in the full interest of transparency, I should also disclose that I occupy this strange place in this conversation. Because on one hand, I practice and advocate for indigenous and natural medicine traditions, and I even practice them as a sacrament of communion in my church. But I'm also an investor in Compass Pathways, so I can see both sides. Part of me celebrates the scientific progress, and part of me worries about what might be lost along the way. And I don't know. That's why I'm sharing my thoughts. But I'm curious, what do you think about this whole situation? Comment below.